Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's special news broadcast on overpopulation and overcrowding. I'm Ryan Page, and here's today's top story. Overpopulation has only become a very recent problem. Population grows exponentially, meaning that the rate goes much faster as time goes on. If one family of two has two kids, and those two kids have two kids of their own, and so on and so forth, you have a population that curves up instead of having a gradual growth. People that work together in a small space, it creates a settlement that more people are attracted to live in and gathers people together and grows until it can't grow anymore. And then your settlement turns into a city. The city can only give so much to people, and eventually people get crowded. There are only so many raw materials to support life here on Earth. This has only happened in the past 100 years or so, because in the past there were not enough people to crowd spaces. But now that people are having a lot of children, areas are getting extremely cramped. I have Jeff, a statistician, here to explain the problems that overpopulation has on our society and the society of Southeast Asia. How are you, Jeff?
I'm quite well. Thank you for asking, Ryan.
So, Jeff, what can you tell us about the problem of overpopulation in the Far East? Here's a comparison of Southeast Asia to an up-and-coming country, South Africa. I have taken the population and size of 4 countries in Southeast Asia: Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. In Thailand, there are roughly 67 million people covering a 513,000 kilometer space, which makes about 133 people per square kilometer. In Cambodia, there are close to 15.5 million people covering 176 kilometers of space, making about 87 people per square kilometer. Laos is a small outlier, such that Laos has nearly 7 million people and 237,000 kilometers of space, making about 28 people per square kilometer. And here's the kicker. In Vietnam, 93.5 million people occupy 310,000 kilometers of space, making a population density of 301 people per square kilometer. Combine these statistics to get a total of 183.5 million people in 1,236,000 kilometers of space, for a grand total of 137 people per square kilometer. Compare that to South Africa, who has a very similar size, but 3 times less the population. The 4 countries I listed are roughly the size of Alaska when combined. Imagine the 137 people per square kilometer in a size as titanic as Alaska, and you get a feel for how big of a problem this is. Wow, Jeff, that seems like it's a big problem to me. Is there anything else that you would like to point out? I only said a small part of Asia that is overpopulated. I didn't even include India and the southern part of China, with the most overcrowded area in the world, with India having a whopping 415 people per square kilometer. Also, there's Indonesia, where you can't even take a step without running into someone. Even though there are places with high population densities elsewhere, like Belgium and the Netherlands, their size seems microscopic compared to Southeast Asian countries. That's absolutely shocking, Jeff. You have been wonderful today for us, Jeff. I hope we can see you again soon. Thank you, Ryan. Pleasure being on the show. Cheers, Jeff! In science, when molecules are compressed closely, like matters in a solid state are, energy travels extremely quickly through them. The same thing applies to people pressed in a tight area. When people are close together, information and other things can travel very rapidly. It not only applies to information, but also to the health and well-being of people as well. Diseases like influenza and the common cold can transmit to other hosts instantly, just by a cough or a breath. Relative to before, the new hosts cough or breathe around other people, and soon everyone in your area has the same sickness. With the right amount of space, the spread of these diseases can be reduced substantially. Some households in not as advanced nations need to have extended families. This means not only do the children and parents live together, but the cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents live under the same roof. In urban areas, many of these extended families live near each other so that they have about 1,000 people living in a space where the average American neighborhood has about 100. These families also have up to around 7 children per household for economic reasons. There's also a high demand for jobs, but with the high population, there are only so many jobs available. Take a look at the subway station in Japan. They literally have workers who make actual money to push commuters onto the train. This shows how crowded certain areas can get. The Earth only has a limited supply of natural resources, and these resources need to be spread among the people. This works for areas that have a relatively spread out population because they can get more of what they need. However, in overcrowded areas, the resources need to be spread equally, so everyone gets less than what they need. Another big factor is pollution and the risk overpopulation has on our environment. Since there are more people, there is a higher chance of litter washing away into our waterways and killing the ecosystems. The same thing goes with the air pollution. More people means more jobs in the factories, which in turn makes more smoke go into the air. Look at Hong Kong. Tourists aren't able to take decent pictures because of how much smog there is, so they have to use a fake poster to trick the camera. But the biggest problem? The population growth rate. As I said earlier, population grows on an exponential curve, so the population is only going to boom from here on out. This means that overcrowding is only going to get worse in the future. Especially in these third world countries, they already are barely able to supply each of their citizens, so when the population rises and rises, they aren't able to survive as a nation. There have been many attempts to control the population conflict. Since this is a relatively recent problem in the world, not much has been able to be done to stop it. In 1980, China enforced the one-child policy, in which every family was to have one child and try and reduce the overpopulation crisis in China. On paper, it sounds like a good idea, right? Wrong. While this policy had a very tiny impact on the overpopulation problem, it created many new problems in its wake. One problem it created was sexism towards females increased. Some families are so disgusted by having a female as a child, they are willing to give the child up for adoption just because the child is a woman. One method that has worked out great in some areas is vertical construction. Instead of building cities outwards, cities are built upwards to make as much space in tight areas as possible. In New York City, the average height of a building is 38 stories, which includes all of the houses in Queens and the Bronx, which barely reach 3 stories. Manhattan buildings generally reach close to 75 stories. Vertical construction makes much needed space above or below the surface, which makes the world seem a little less crowded. Another way society has coped with crowding is public transportation. The metro subway station takes people into crowded cities and puts a lot of them onto trains to take them where they need to go. This makes sidewalks and streets a lot less crowded, but this is only a temporary fix. At the end of the day, the areas are still cramped and people are still forcing through crowds just to get to their beds. In the future, some ways to help affect this problem in a positive way is create more nuclear family housing. There are also places in the world where close to nobody lives, like Siberia in Russia or the rainforests of Brazil. There is enough space for people to diffuse to those places to avoid crowding each other, but let's be honest, who really wants to live in Siberia? The US has gotten a taste of that. I mean, just look at Boston. If that's what it takes to stop overpopulation, then so be it. Take one thing out of this special, is that the only way to stop overpopulation is to have less children. I'm Ryan Page, and until next time, goodbye everybody.